He opens his eyes, alive again. He does not remember how many times this has happened. In truth, neither do I. We do what must be done. He is an eternal. He has always been. Today on the Comic Book Report, Eternals Volume 1, Only Death is Eternal. Stick around and check it out. Greetings all, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm bringing you a trade paperback review of a series I finally got to dip my toe into. Of course, I'm talking about the 2021 Eternals series from Kieron Gillen. This book is a trip and I cannot wait to dive in and review it for all of you today. But before we do, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking for comic book collected editions like this one, definitely check them out. You can see the link in my description. If you find something you like, you can even use my code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or the code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Kieron Gillen and illustrated by Esad Ribic. The comics in this collection were first published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2021. The volume itself collects Eternals, the 2021 series, issues 1 through 6. And finally, this standard-sized trade paperback has glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and comes in at 160 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our look at that trade paperback collection today from Marvel Comics. Right from the jump, the cover art on the front and back cover is really indicative of Ribic's style here throughout the book. His interior artwork maybe looks a little bit more sketchy than some of the illustrious illustrations we have on this in the back cover, which themselves are both lifted from issue covers of some of the issues throughout the book. But the art is still really similar with that kind of painted or pastel, dreamy style to it, which I think really serves this story, these characters, and the overall kind of fantasy science fiction feeling of this book. I first became aware of Ribic with his art on things like Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars, which was just fantastic. And as far as the author is concerned, Kieron Gillen, I'm familiar with things like Once and Future, absolutely stunning. I know he's written some Star Wars books as well. A tremendous creative team that had me excited for this book. Let's look at that glued binding really quick. It's just a standard trade paperback binding. Nothing too crazy here. I had no issues with it. You'll get to take a look and see if you notice any gutter loss as I flip my way through it, but I thought it was all fine. And with that taken care of, we can dive into the collection proper today. So this is a standard 6-issue trade paperback. I love reviewing these. I know I'm a big fan of the hardcovers and omnibus editions, but I know there are handfuls of you out there that like a good trade paperback like myself. I know that these can sometimes be the most affordable option out there for many people, including myself from time to time, make no mistake. So I was eager to dive into this collection. I know there might be subsequent recollections of this run in the future. As far as I can tell, this is a pretty celebrated modern run for Eternals. I had certainly heard a lot of very good positive reviews and buzz about this series, and I think with that dynamic duo of a creative team, I certainly understand why. So I went into this book with a lot of expectation, and I do think that it really fell a little bit short for me, at least in this first offering, the first 6 issues here, but I want to get into a little bit of why. I will say that I assumed this would be a really good entry point for new readers of the Eternals, starting with a volume 1 and having such high praise about the book. I will say for me though, as someone who only is familiar with the Eternals after the MCU film Eternals, this was my first venture into Eternals comics. I had never read the original by Jack Kirby or the stuff from Gaiman or anything else in the history of Eternals. I know some of those characters even served on the Avengers and things like that throughout time, but I had never really delved into these characters whatsoever. And knowing these creators and hearing the positive feedback, I thought that this would be my perfect kind of foot in the door of this this franchise. I actually really enjoyed the film for the most part, so I was eager to take a look at these characters. And something I'll say right from the jump, because of my experience watching the film, I do think that this book worked okay. I had enough of the foundational understanding for these characters, the ensemble cast, who they were, their whole dynamic, before delving into the story. However, if you've never read The Eternals and you haven't seen the film and you're not culturally aware of these characters, I do think it would be easy to get a little lost in this first volume. We have a really big, eclectic band of primary characters that are given really no large introduction. I think you're almost assumed that you know who these characters are, you know some of their back history, interactions, power sets, things like that. And maybe this reads fine for someone going in totally blind, but I felt throughout at several points that I was so happy I watched the movie, because I would have been totally lost reading this if it weren't for that. Right away, we start with the character of Icarus. He's someone who has a lot of the similar powers of Superman: flight, strength, heat vision, and he basically awakens in his new life as an Eternal once again. For those that maybe don't know much about these characters, the Eternals are sort of artificially created, kind of humanoid characters that usually have special abilities or superpowers, and they've lived over and over again kind of these long, enduring, kind of immortal lives on Earth, being around for thousands and thousands of years, and every so often getting caught up in the affairs of man. They're essentially created to take out the, air quotes, bad guys, the deviants, but again, they get drawn into all sorts of other conflicts and things throughout their history. And again, this whole group of characters, the Eternals, kind of act as a dysfunctional family more than a superhero team, and you really feel that in this book. I think it was explored extraordinarily well for that. I actually think that that was one of the strengths of the characters in this book, is the kind of interaction between the Eternals themselves. We do feel this big dysfunctional family dynamic, and I thought that that was really authentic and believable. But beyond that, most of the Eternals actually felt very lifeless or cold to me. They felt very robotic or, yes, artificial, and maybe that was the point in characterizing them in this way, but there wasn't a lot that really felt warm to me. There were a couple exceptions in the Eternals cast that made me feel a little bit easier to connect to emotionally or empathize with, but for the most part, I frankly felt a little bit detached. In fact, I found myself much more intrigued by the world building aspects, a lot of the science fiction settings that we had, and actually the prime villain of this piece, which is of course the mad titan Thanos, and how he connects with all of these Eternals. It was definitely a fascinating plot point, and I feel like Thanos was used in a way I haven't really seen him utilized much in the past. As far as the story goes, we again have Icarus waking up in his kind of rebooted self as an Eternal. Pretty soon they take Sprite, this young girl Eternal, or at least someone who appears that way. They take her out of kind of Eternal jail, wake her up again. But before long, one of the Eternals kind of gets murdered. There's some kind of big conspiracy happening. Some of their technology is acting a little weird, and they're trying to figure out who's behind it, what's happening. They gathered the different characters. We have them all meeting, and again, this is where you see a lot of that dysfunctional family dynamic. There was clearly a lot of bad blood that happened between some of these characters, maybe in past lives or in more recent past, and we're only treated to just the surface level of what that stuff may have been. I'm not sure if these were plot lines that were explored in previous Eternals volumes, or if this is something we're just jumping in medias res, so to speak, but I do feel like watching that movie, I had enough of a functional understanding for, yeah, this is a messed up family, let's get on with the show, and that's really how I felt. I think that at the core of it, this feels like a mystery science fiction thriller, I would say. There's also a character drama kind of piece to all of it, but for the most part, I felt pulled along just by this kind of collaboration and just formation of the Eternal team, kind of getting the band back together issue to issue, and figuring out who is causing some of these things to happen, who murdered one of the Eternals, what is going on here. Is it Sprite who's been newly released? Is it another defective Eternal? Is it a deviant? is it someone else? We come to find that it was Thanos, but that he was working with one of the Eternals, and we're trying to figure out who that is. They're pointing fingers. We have Icarus also caught up with protecting this young boy who, in a weird vision, he realizes that he's connected somehow, and he feels that he in the future will cause the death of this child. So we have him kind of distracted trying to play hero. And for the most part, we have a lot of these different Eternals they introduced kind of trying to serve their own ends, even as they all try to figure out this mystery for themselves. We have the character of Droog. He was seen in the movie as well, being kind of one of the most untrustworthy Eternals, having the powers of mind control. And we do get to see interesting colors from that character that I'll try not to spoil too deeply right here. But he was definitely one of the more fascinating Eternals. I think that there was a lot of dysfunction around that character. Really interesting. You know, we have a couple of other notable appearances from Marvel mainstays like Tony Stark's Iron Man. I like how they portrayed him in this book, someone who the characters ally themselves with, but largely keep into the dark, because these Eternals, you almost get the feel that they're above some of these Earth mightiest heroes, some of the Avengers, because they've just been around so long. You know, then the Avengers are kind of almost a passing fad in some way to some of them. I thought that was really interesting too, how they tried to keep these issues within the Eternals, namely everything with Thanos. Because of that, we feel like we're dealing with like a big cosmic level problem, but in a way that they're trying to keep it under wraps. And that was fun. I liked venturing through that. I think the art from Ribic throughout, again, lent to that kind of surrealism of this Eternals world, and this feeling like there's so many layers to what's really going on in the world around them. Like you have the Avengers, the superheroes, everyone's day to day, and then you have this layer of the Eternals who are working and teleporting throughout the world. They have this technology. They've been around for thousands of years, and there's really more going on under the surface. And I like that. There was a kind of clandestine feel to the narrative. I think that there is heavy fantasy elements and science fiction elements to this storytelling and these characters specifically. And I think because of that, Ribic's artwork again explores this kind of fantastical, maybe off balance, slightly odd or unsettling feeling. The surrealistic art style of Ribic just really shined here. I think it absolutely fit the storytelling. And when you combine that with, again, Gillen's work, which can sometimes be very cerebral and science fiction heavy, it just really melded in a really nice way. I do think I felt a little alienated, though. With such a cast like this, I would have loved to get a little bit more support or foundational information in text, rather than me relying so much on my knowledge of the film. I do wonder if fans of the Eternals were able to slip right into this new series with little difficulty, but I think I would have expected the on-ramp of this volume 1 to be a little more accessible to real casual readers or prospective fans out there without needing to do much homework. But I do think without the film, I would have been lost. And that's not to say they don't try here. We're actually given these little expositional pages or double spreads that have a lot of just information dumps. We'll have characters of the hierarchy of the Eternals or the deviants or different things within their worlds or history, and they're all in these kind of black pages with this blue text that, again, they're just information dumps. And I've seen the likes of this on things like House of X, Powers of 10, again at Marvel, that by Jonathan Hickman, that just drop all of these exposition nuggets and these heavily prose or text or kind of diagram kind of images to convey information without really detracting too much from the main storytelling or bogging down the dialogue. I do find this a bit tedious with House of X, Powers of 10, and by and large the Krakoa era of X books, but I do feel like sometimes they're necessary to convey some of their storytelling and keep momentum. But in Hickman's world and in some of those X books, I almost feel like those expositional interludes are used more effectively. I feel like here we almost tried to copy it or tried to throw it in there, but I never once felt like those pages really helped inform the storytelling for me. You know, that's not true. There was one that dealt with the hierarchy of some of the Eternals. I guess that was helpful to give me kind of a name and positioning of some of the characters. But for the most part, I found that a lot of these expositional pages, they were just kind of ineffectual, and they really took me out of the reading experience. I admire them trying, but I almost feel like if you're going to put these in here, make them just a little bit more palatable and help me demystify or decode the storytelling we're doing. And maybe I just missed it in my reading, but I feel like we felt a little short of that. One thing I did like in this story that I felt like was truly unique was that the main narrative voice we have that does all the thought bubbles and kind of primary narration throughout the entire run, It seems to be from the perspective of Earth, reflecting on the nature of the Eternals and their struggle and their relationship with Earth, and we have this sense that the Earth itself is kind of spiraling out or not doing well. This was such a fascinating narrative choice to me. Again, I'm not sure if they've done this in the history of the Eternals previously, but this felt fresh and interesting, and I think they introduced this concept of it being the Earth kind of early in the run, but I still felt myself wondering, okay, is it actually one of these characters? Who's really talking here? Because this narrative voice has so much agency and personality that I actually felt them to be a lot warmer and more humanized than a lot of the Eternals we were watching kind of play out their stories on page. This was a bit fascinating to me, having the narrator be so much more of a warm character than the actual characters he's describing. Just a really interesting turn of events here for me. At any rate, the battle between Eternals and Thanos was definitely one to remember. I'll leave some mystery to you, but that's really the first 6 issues of Eternals. There were some handful of extras at the back there that was a ton of fun. I think all that's left is to give this book a grade. For a truly unique science fiction reading experience set within the modern Marvel universe, paired with some gorgeous artwork that always kept me just a little bit off balance, The Comic Book Report is happy to give Eternals by Kieron Gillen and Esad Ribic Volume 1 a C+. This was a little bit above average for me as a book. I think it was compelling, interesting, and mysterious, but I do think it fell flat a little bit with the character introductions and connectivity between me as the reader and your primary set of characters here. I do think it was more fascinating than solid as far as I was concerned. I am interested enough to pick up subsequent volumes, but I will say this fell a little bit flat for me. However, I know this is a beloved series, so I would love to hear from all of you. What am I missing? What did you enjoy about Eternals, or generally, what did you think of this run? Again, would be happy to hear from all of you. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this has been The Comic Book Report. Don't forget to give this video a like, leave your comment, and maybe check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching again, and have a good one.